Section 24 of the Rustlers of Pecos County by Zane Grey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14. Through the Valley. Sampson looked strangely at the great bloody blot on my breast, and his look made me conscious of a dark hurrying of my mind. Morton came stamping up the steps with blunt queries, with anxious mien. When he saw the front of me, he halted, threw wide his arms. "There come the girls!" suddenly exclaimed Sampson. "Morton, help me drag Wright inside. They mustn't see him." I was facing down the porch toward the court and corrals. Miss Sampson and Sally had come in sight, were swiftly approaching, evidently alarmed. Steele, no doubt, had remained out at the camp. I was watching them, wondering what they would do and say presently, and then Sampson and Johnson came to carry me indoors. They laid me on the couch in the parlor where the girls used to be so often. "Russ, you're pretty hard hit," said Sampson, bending over me with his hands at my breast. The room was bright with sunshine, yet the light seemed to be fading. "Reckon I am," I replied. "I'm sorry. If only you could have told me sooner. Wright, damn him. Always I've split over him." "But the last time, Sampson." "Yes, and I came near driving you to kill me, too. Russ, you talked me out of it. For Diane's sake, she'll be here in a minute. This'll be harder than facing a gun." "Hard now, but it'll turn out okay." "Russ, will you do me a favor?" he asked, and he seemed shamefaced. "Sure." "Let Diane and Sally think Wright shot you. He's dead. It can't matter, and you're hard hit. The girls are fond of you. If you go under, Russ, the old side of my life is coming back. It's been coming. It'll be here just about when she enters this room. And by God, I'd change places with you if I could." "Glad you said that, Sampson," I replied. "And sure, Wright plugged me. It's our secret. I've a reason to. Not that it matters much now." The light was fading. I could not talk very well. I felt dumb, strange, locked in ice, with dull little prickings of my flesh, with dim rushing sounds in my ears. But my mind was clear. Evidently there was little to be done. Morton came in, looked at me, and went out. I heard the quick light steps of the girls on the porch and murmuring voices. "Where am I hit?" I whispered. "3 places, arm, shoulder, and a bad one in the breast. It got your lung, I'm afraid. But if you don't go quick, you've a chance." "Sure I've a chance." "Russ, I'll tell the girls, do what I can for you, then settle with Morton and clear out." Just then Diane and Sally entered the room. I heard 2 low cries, so different in tone, and I saw 2 dim white faces. Sally flew to my side and dropped to her knees. Both hands went to my face, then to my breast. She lifted them, shaking. They were red. White and mute, she gazed from them to me. But some women's intuition kept her from fainting. "Papa!" cried Diane, wringing her hands. "Don't give way," he replied. "Both you girls will need your nerve. Russ is badly hurt. There's little hope for him." Sally moaned and dropped her face against me, clasping me convulsively. I tried to reach a hand out to touch her, but I could not move. I felt her hair against my face. Diane uttered a low, heart-rending cry, which both Sampson and I understood. "Listen, let me tell it quick," he said huskily. "There's been a fight. Russ killed Snecker and Wright. They resisted arrest. It was Wright's gun that put Russ down. Russ let me off. In fact, Diane, he saved me. I'm to divide my property, return so far as much as possible what I've stolen, leave Texas at once and forever. You'll find me back in old Louisiana if you ever want to come home." As she stood there, realizing her deliverance, with the dark and tragic glory of her eyes passing from her father to me, my own sight shadowed, and I thought if I were dying then, it was not in vain. "Send for Steele," I whispered. Silently, swiftly, breathlessly, they worked over me. I was exquisitely sensitive to touch, to sound, but I could not see anything. By and by all was quiet, and I slipped into a black void. Familiar heavy, swift footsteps, the thump of heels of a powerful and striding man, jarred into the blackness that held me, seemed to split it, to let me out, and I opened my eyes in a sunlit room to see Sally's face all lined and haggard, to see Miss Sampson fly to the door, and the stalwart Ranger bow his lofty head to enter. However far life had ebbed from me, then it came rushing back, keen-sighted, memorable, with agonizing pain in every nerve. I saw him start. I heard him cry. But I could not speak. He bent over me, and I tried to smile. He stood silent, his hand on me, while Diane Sampson told swiftly, brokenly, what had happened. How she told it, I tried to whisper a protest. To anyone on earth except Steele, I might have wished to appear a hero. Still, at that moment, I had more dread of him than any other feeling. She finished the story with her head on his shoulder, with tears that certainly were in part for me. Once in my life, then, I saw him stunned. But when he recovered, it was not Diane that he thought of first, nor the end of Sampson's power. He turned to me. "Little hope," he cried out, with a deep ring in his voice. "No, there's every hope. No bullet hole like that could ever kill this Ranger. Russ?" I could not answer him, but this time I did achieve a smile. There was no shadow, no pain in his face, such as had haunted me in Sally and Diane's. He could fight death the same as he could fight evil. He vitalized the girls. Diane began to hope. Sally lost her woe. He changed the atmosphere of that room. Something filled it, something like himself, big, virile, strong. The very look of him made me suddenly want to live. And all at once, it seemed, I felt alive. And that was like taking the deadened end of nerves to cut them raw and quicken them with fiery current. From stupor I had leaped to pain, and that tossed me into fever. There were spaces darkened, mercifully shutting me in. There were others of light, where I burned and burned in my heated blood. Sally, like the wraith she had become in my mind, passed in and out. Diane watched and helped in those hours when sight was clear. But always the Ranger was with me. Sometimes I seemed to feel his spirit grappling with mine, drawing me back from the verge. Sometimes, in strange dreams, I saw him there between me and a dark, cold, sinister shape. The fever passed, and with the first nourishing drink given me, I seemed to find my tongue, to gain something. "Hello, old man," I whispered to Steele. "Oh, Lord, Russ, to think you would double-cross me the way you did." That was his first speech to me after I had appeared to face round from the grave. His good-humored reproach told me more than any other thing how far from his mind was the thought of death for me. Then he talked a little to me, cheerfully, with that directness and force characteristic of him always, showing me that the danger was past and that I would now be rapidly on the mend. I discovered that I cared little whether I was on the mend or not. When I had passed the state of somber unrealities, and then the hours of pain, and then that first inspiring flush of renewed desire to live, an entirely different mood came over me. But I kept it to myself. I never even asked why for 3 days Sally never entered the room where I lay. I associated this fact, however, with what I had imagined her shrinking from me, her intent and pale face, her singular manner, when occasion made it necessary or unavoidable for her to be near me. No difficulty was there in associating my change of mood with her absence. I brooded. Steele's keen insight betrayed me to him, but all his power and his spirit availed nothing to cheer me. I pretended to be cheerful. I drank and ate everything given me. I was patient and quiet, but I ceased to mend. Then one day she came back, and Steele, who was watching me as she entered, quietly got up and without a word took Diane out of the room and left me alone with Sally. "Russ, I've been sick myself, in bed for 3 days," she said. "I'm better now. I hope you are. You look so pale. Do you still think, brood about that fight?" "Yes, I can't forget. I'm afraid it cost me more than life." Sally was somber, bloomy, thoughtful. "You weren't driven to kill George?" she asked. "How do you mean?" "By that awful instinct, that hankering to kill you once told me these gunmen had." "No, I can swear it wasn't that. I didn't want to kill him, but he forced me. As I had to go after these two men, it was a foregone conclusion about right. It was premeditated. I have no excuse." "Hush! Tell me if you confronted them, drew on them, then you had a chance to kill my uncle?" "Yes, I could have done it easily." "Why, then, didn't you?" "It was for Diane's sake. I'm afraid I didn't think of you. I'd put you out of my mind." "Well, if a man can be noble at the same time he's terrible, you've been, Russ. I don't know how I feel. I'm sick, and I can't think. I see, though, what you saved Diane and Steele. Why, she's touching happiness again, fearfully, yet really. Think of that. God only knows what you did for Steele. If I judge it by a suffering as you lay there about to die, it would be beyond words to tell. But, Russ, you're pale and shaky now. Hush! No more talk." With all my eyes and mind and heart and soul, I watched to see if she shrank from me. She was passive, yet tender as she smoothed my pillow and moved my head. A dark abstraction hung over her, and it was so strange, so foreign to her nature. No sensitiveness on earth could have equaled mine at that moment. And I saw and felt and knew that she did not shrink from me. Thought and feeling escaped me for a while. I dozed. The old shadows floated to and fro. When I awoke, Steele and Diane had just come in. As he bent over me, I looked up into his keen gray eyes, and there was no mask on my own as I looked up to him. "Son, the thing that was needed was a change of nurses," he said gently. "I intend to make up some sleep now and leave you in better care." From that hour I improved. I slept. I lay quietly awake. I partook of nourishing food. I listened and watched, and all the time I gained. But I spoke very little, and though I tried to brighten when Steele was in the room, I made only indifferent success of it. Days passed. Sally was almost always with me, yet seldom alone. She was grave where once she had been gay. How I watched her face, praying for that shade to lift. How I listened for a note of the old music in her voice. Sally Langdon had sustained a shock to her soul almost as dangerous as had been the blow at my life. Still I hoped. I had seen other women's deadened and darkened spirits rebound and glow once more. It began to dawn upon me, however, that more than time was imperative if she were ever to become her old self again. Studying her closer, with less thought of myself and her reaction to my presence, I discovered that she trembled at the shadows, seemed like a frightened deer, with a step always on its trail, was afraid of the dark. Then I wondered why I had not long before divined one cause of her strangeness. The house where I had killed one of her kin would ever be haunted for her. She had said she was a Southerner and that blood was thick. When I had thought out the matter a little further, I deliberately sat up in bed, scaring the wits out of all my kind nurses. "Steele, I'll never get well in this house. I want to go home. When can you take me?" They remonstrated with me and pleaded and scolded, all to little avail. Then they were persuaded to take me seriously, to plan, providing I improved, to start in a few days. We were to ride out of Pecos County together, back along the stage trail to civilization. The look in Sally's eyes decided my measure of improvement. I could have started that very day and have borne up under any pain or distress. Strange to see, too, how Steele and Diane responded to the stimulus of my idea, to the promise of what lay beyond the wild and barren hills. He told me that day about the headlong flight of every lawless character out of Linrock, the very hour that Snecker and Wright and Sampson were known to have fallen. Steele expressed deep feeling, almost mortification, that the credit of the final coup had gone to him instead of me. His denial and explanation had been only a few soundless words in the face of a grateful and clamorous populace that tried to reward him, to make him mayor of Linrock. Sampson had made restitution in every case where he had personally gained at the loss of a farmer or rancher, and the accumulation of years went far toward returning to Linrock what it had lost in a material way. He had been a poor man when he boarded the stage for Sanderson on his way out of Texas forever. Not long afterward I heard Steele talking to Miss Sampson in a deep and agitated voice. "You must rise above this. When I come upon you alone, I see the shadow, the pain in your face. How wonderfully this thing has turned out when it might have ruined you. I expected it to ruin you. Who but that wild boy in there could have saved us all? Diane, you have had cause for sorrow, but your father is alive and will live it down. Perhaps back there in Louisiana the dishonor will never be known. Pecos County is far from your old home, and even in San Antonio and Austin a man's evil repute means little. Then the line between a rustler and a rancher is hard to draw in these wild border days. Rustling is stealing cattle, and I once heard a well-known rancher say that all rich cattlemen had done a little stealing. Your father drifted out here. Like a good many others, he succeeded. It's perhaps just as well not to split hairs, to judge him by the law and morality of a civilized country. Some way or other he drifted in with bad men. Maybe a deal that was honest somehow tied his hands and started him in wrong. This matter of land, water, a few stray head of stock had to be decided out of court. I'm sure in his case he never realized where he was drifting. Then one thing led to another until he was face to face with dealings that took on crooked form. To protect himself, he bound men to him, and so the gang developed. Many powerful gangs have developed that way out here. He could not control them. He became involved with them. And eventually their dealings became deliberately and boldly dishonest. That meant the inevitable spilling of blood sooner or later. And so he grew into the leader because he was the strongest. Whatever he is to be judged for, I think he could have been infinitely worse. When he ceased speaking, I had the same impulse that must have governed Steele, somehow, to show Sampson not so black as he was painted, to give him the benefit of a doubt, to arraign him justly in the eyes of rangers who knew what wild border life was. "Steele, bring Diane in," I called. "I've something to tell her." They came quickly, concerned probably at my tone. "I've been hoping for a chance to tell you something, Miss Sampson. That day I came here, your father was quarreling with Wright. I had heard them do that before. He hated Wright. The reason came out just before we had the fight. It was my plan to surprise them. I did. I told them you went out to meet Steele, that you two were in love with each other. Wright grew wild. He swore no one would ever have you. Then Sampson said he'd rather have you Steele's wife than Wright's. I'll not forget that scene. There was a great deal back of it, long before you ever came out to Linrock. Your father said that he had backed Wright, that the deal had ruined him, made him a rustler. He said he'd quit, he was done. Now, this is all clear to me. And I want to explain, Miss Sampson, it was Wright who ruined your father. It was Wright who was the rustler. It was Wright who made the gang necessary. But Wright had not the brains or the power to lead men. Because blood is thick, your father became the leader of that gang. At heart, he was never a criminal. The reason I respected him was because he showed himself a man at the last. He faced me to be shot, and I couldn't do it. As Steele said, you've reason for sorrow. But you must get over it. You mustn't brood. I do not see that you'll be disgraced or dishonored. Of course, that's not the point. The vital thing is whether or not a woman of your high-mindedness had real and lasting cause for shame. Steele says no. I say no. Then Miss Sampson dropped down beside me, her eyes shining and wet. Sally entered the room in time to see her cousin bend to kiss me gratefully with sisterly fervor. Yet it was a woman's kiss, given for its own sake. Sally could not comprehend. It was too sudden, too unheard of, that Diane Sampson should kiss me, the man she did not love. Sally's white, sad face changed, and in the flaming wave of scarlet that dyed neck and cheek and brow, I read with mighty proud of heart that, despite the dark stain between us, she loved me still. End of section 24. Section 25 of The Rustlers of Pecos County by Zane Grey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 15. Convalescence. 4 mornings later we were aboard the stage, riding down the main street on the way out of Linrock. The whole town turned out to bid us farewell. The cheering, the clamor, the almost passionate fervor of the populace irritated me, and I could not see the incident from their point of view. Never in my life had I been so eager to get out of a place. But then I was morbid, and the whole world hinged on one thing. Morton insisted on giving us an escort as far as Del Rio. It consisted of 6 cowboys mounted with light packs, and they rode ahead of the stage. We had the huge vehicle to ourselves. A comfortable bed had been rigged up for me by placing boards across from seat to seat, and furnishing it with blankets and pillows. By some squeezing, there was still room enough inside for my 3 companions, but Steele expressed an intention of riding mostly outside, and Miss Sampson's expression betrayed her. I was to be alone with Sally. The prospect thrilled while it saddened me. How different this ride from that first one, with all its promise of adventure and charm. "It's over," said Steele thickly. "It's done. I'm glad. For their sakes, glad for ours. We're out of town." I had been quick to miss the shouts and cheers, and I had been just as quick to see or to imagine a subtle change in Sally Langdon's face. We had not traveled a mile before the tension relaxed about her lips. The downcast eyelids lifted, and I saw beyond any pre-adventure of doubt a lighter spirit. Then I relaxed myself, for I had keyed up every nerve to make myself strong for this undertaking. I lay back with closed eyes, weary, aching, in more pain than I wanted them to discover. And I thought and thought. Miss Sampson had said to me, "Russ, it'll all come right. I can tell you now what you never guessed." For years, Sally had been fond of our cousin George Wright. She hadn't seen him since she was a child, but she remembered. She had an only brother who was the image of George. Sally devotedly loved Arthur. He was killed in the rebellion. She never got over it. That left her without any family. George and I were her nearest kin. How she looked forward to meeting George out here, but he disappointed her right at the start. She hates a drinking man. I think she came to hate George, too. But he always reminded her of Arthur, and she could never get over that. So naturally, when you killed George, she was terribly shocked. There were nights when she was haunted, when I had to stay with her. Vaughn and I have studied her, talked about her, and we think she's gradually recovering. She loved you, too, and Sally doesn't change. Once with her is for always. So let me say to you what you said to me. Do not brood. All will yet be well, thank God. Those had been words to remember, to make me patient, to lessen my insistent fear. Yet what did I know of women? Had not Diane Sampson and Sally Langdon amazed and nonplussed me many a time, at the very moment when I had calculated to a nicety my conviction of their action, their feeling? It was possible that I had killed Sally's love for me, though I could not believe so. But it was very possible that, still loving me, she might never break down the barrier between us. The beginning of that journey distressed me physically, yet gradually, as I grew accustomed to the roll of the stage and to the occasional jars, I found myself easier in body. Fortunately there had been rain, which settled the dust, and a favorable breeze made riding pleasant, where ordinarily it would have been hot and disagreeable. We tarried long enough in the little hamlet of Sampson for Steele to get letters from reliable ranchers. He wanted a number of references to verify the Ranger report he had to turn in to Captain Neal. This precaution he took so as to place in Neal's hands all the evidence needed to convince Governor Smith. And now, as Steele returned to us and entered the stage, he spoke of this report. "It's the longest and the best I ever turned in," he said, with a gray flame in his eyes. "I shan't let Russ read it. He's peevish because I want his part put on record. And listen, Diane, there's to be a blank line in this report. Your father's name will never be recorded. Neither the governor, nor the adjutant general, nor Captain Neal, nor anyone back in Austin will ever know who this mysterious leader of the Pecos gang might have been. Even out here, very few know. Many suppose, but few knew. I've shut the mouths of those few. The blank line in the report is for a supposed and mysterious leader who vanished. Jack Blome, the reputed leader, and all his lawless associates are dead. Linrock is free and safe now, its future in the hands of roused, determined, and capable men." We were all silent after Steele ceased talking. I did not believe Diane could have spoken just then. If sorrow and joy could be perfectly blended in one beautiful expression, they were in her face. By and by I dared to say, "And Vaughn Steele, Lone Star Ranger, has seen his last service?" "Yes," he replied with emotion. Sally stirred and turned a strange look upon us all. "In that case, then, if I'm not mistaken, there were two Lone Star Rangers, and both have seen their last service." Sally's lips were trembling, the way they trembled when it was impossible to tell whether she was about to laugh or cry. The first hint of her old combative spirit or her old archness. A wave of feeling rushed over me, too much for me in my weakened condition. Dizzy, racked with sudden shooting pains, I closed my eyes, and the happiness I embraced was all the sweeter for the suffering it entailed. Something beat into my ears, into my brain, with the regularity and rapid beat of pulsing blood. Not too late, not too late. From that moment the ride grew different, even as I improved with leaps and bounds. Sanderson behind us, the long gray barren between Sanderson and the Rio Grande behind us, Del Rio for 2 days, where I was able to sit up, all behind us, and the eastward trail to Uvalde before us. We were the only passengers on the stage from Del Rio to Uvalde. Perhaps Steele had so managed the journey. Assuredly he had become an individual with whom traveling under the curious gaze of strangers would have been embarrassing. He was most desperately in love, and Diane, all in a few days, while riding these long tedious miles, ordinarily so fatiguing, had renewed her bloom, had gained what she had lost. She too was desperately in love, though she remembered her identity occasionally, and that she was in the company of a badly shot-up young man and a broken-hearted cousin. Most of the time Diane and Steele rode on top of the stage. When they did ride inside, their conduct was not unbecoming. Indeed, it was sweet to watch. Yet it loosed the fires of jealous rage and longing in me, and certainly had some remarkable effect upon Sally. Gradually she had been losing that strange and somber mood she had acquired, to brighten and change more and more. Perhaps she divined something about Diane and Steele that escaped me. Anyway, all of a sudden she was transformed. "Look here, if you people want to spoon, please get out on top," she said. If that was not the old Sally Langdon, I did not know who it was. Miss Sampson tried to appear offended, and Steele tried to look insulted, but they both failed. They could not have looked anything but happy. Youth and love were too strong for this couple, whom circumstances might well have made grave and thoughtful. They were magnet and steel, powder and spark. Any moment, right before my eyes, I expected them to rush right into each other's arms. And when they refrained, merely substituting clasped hands for a dearer embrace, I closed my eyes and remembered them, as they would live in my memory forever, standing crushed together on the ridge that day, white lips to white lips, embodying all that was beautiful, passionate, and tragic. And I, who had been their undoing, in the end was their salvation. How I hugged that truth to my heart! It seemed, following Sally's pert remark, that after an interval of decent dignity, Diane and Steele did go out upon the top of the stage. "Russ," whispered Sally, "they're up to something. I heard a few words. I'll bet you they're going to get married in San Antonio." "Well, it's about time," I replied. "But oughtn't they take us into their confidence?" "Sally, they have forgotten we are upon the earth." "Oh, I'm so glad they're happy." There was a long silence. It was better for me to ride lying down, in which position I was at this time. After a mile, Sally took my hand and held it without speaking. My heart leaped, but I did not open my eyes or break that spell even with a whisper. "Russ, I must tell you." She faltered, and still I kept my eyes closed. I did not want to wake up from that dream. "Have I been very, very sad?" she went on. "Sad and strange, Sally. That was worse than my bullet holes." She gripped my hand. I felt her hair on my brow, felt her breath on my cheek. "Russ, I swore I'd hate you if you "I know. Don't speak of it," I interposed hurriedly. "But I don't hate you. I love you, and I can't give you up." "Darling, but Sally, can you ever get over it? Can you forget?" Yes, that horrid black spell had gone with the miles. Little by little, mile after mile, and now it's gone. But I had to come to the point. To go back on my word. To tell you, Russ, you never, never had any sense. Then I opened my eyes and my arms too, and we were reunited. It must have been a happy moment, so happy that it numbed me beyond appreciation. "Yes, Sally," I agreed, "but no man ever had such a wonderful girl." "Russ, I never took off your ring," she whispered. "But you hid your hand from my sight," I replied quickly. "Oh, dear Russ, we're crazy as those lunatics outside. Let's think a little." I was very content to have no thought at all, just to see and feel her close to me. "Russ, will you give up the Ranger service for me?" she asked. "Indeed I will." "And leave this fighting Texas, never to return till the day of guns and Rangers and bad men and even breaks is past?" "Yes." "Will you go with me to my old home? It was beautiful once, Russ, before it was let run to wrack and ruin. 1,000 acres, an old stone house, great mossy oaks, a lake and river. There are bear, deer, panther, wild boars in the breaks. You can hunt and ride. I've horses, Russ, such horses. They could run these scrubby bronchos off their legs. Will you come?" "Come? Sally, I rather think I will. But, dearest, after I'm well again I must work," I said earnestly. "I've got to have a job." "You're indeed a poor cowboy out of a job. Remember your deceit. Oh, Russ, well, you'll have work, never fear." "Sally, is this old home of yours near the one Diane speaks of so much?" I asked. "Indeed it is, but hers has been kept under cultivation and in repair while mine has run down. That will be our work, to build it up. So it's settled then?" "Almost. There are certain formalities needful in a compact of this kind." She looked inquiringly at me with a soft flush. "Well, if you are so dense, try to bring back that Sally Langdon who used to torment me. How you broke your promises. How you leaned from your saddle. Kiss me, Sally." Later, as we drew closer to Uvalde, Sally and I sat in one seat, after the manner of Diane and Vaughn, and we looked out over the west where the sun was setting behind dim and distant mountains. We were fast leaving the wild and barren border. Already it seemed far beyond that broken, rugged horizon with its dark lines silhouetted against the rosy and golden sky. Already the spell of its wild life and the grim, haunting faces had begun to fade out of my memory. Let newer Rangers, with less to lose, and with the call in their hearts, go on with our work till soon that wild border would be safe. The great Lone Star State must work out its destiny. Some distant day in the fullness of time, what place the Rangers had in that destiny would be history. End of section 25. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas. End of The Rustlers of Pecos County by Zane Grey.